What does it mean when the agent says they're looking for the cleanest offer? Good afternoon. So, what happens usually is I'll have a listing and agents will call me and they'll say, "Hey, what is it going to take to make this deal? What are we going to need to do to get, this done? Can you give me a number?" I'm like, "No, I can't give you a number." Like, "Well, is there anything that the seller wants?" Yeah, well, we'd like to maybe close on a certain day or something like that, but mainly I'm looking for a clean offer. And for some buyers out there, they might not know what a clean offer is or what that means, and I'm actually convinced that some agents aren't clear on what a clean offer means either. So I thought I would take a moment to go over that today and bring you along with me. If you're a buyer, if you're new to the buying process, this might be very very helpful for you when you do go and make an offer to purchase your first home. So let me get my notes up. Let me pull it up and get started here. Um, so at first, like, what is a clean contract? Well, a clean contract is simply a contract that doesn't contain too many contingencies. What are contingencies? Basically, anything that says something along the lines of, this isn't a completed deal until X, Y, or Z are done. Okay. But clean doesn't have to mean no contingencies. It can also be the structure of your offer. And we'll go over some of the examples of what a clean contract is, what a clean offer is. So it can be something as simple as the date until closing. A clean sales contract would typically have a small closing window. That is the period of time between when your offer is accepted and when the property transfers ownership. In my market, 30 days is considered a quick closing. However, your offer should be crafted to what your seller is looking for. So if a seller is requesting a 45-day closing or a 60-day closing, a clean contract would then have those timeframes. Um, another component of a clean contract is whether or not your offer is in all cash. And I'm going to walk through this. It's kind of tricky. An all cash offer will beat a mortgage for the most part. There are two main reasons for this. One, an all cash offer does not require an appraisal unless it's specified in the contract. And number two, an all cash offer does not have a finance contingency. If you're a seller, the last thing you want to do is lose a buyer at the last moment because the property doesn't appraise or the buyer is somehow not able to get financing. Because that's going to mean you're going to have to put the property back on the market. The market could have changed. The price could be different. All kinds of stuff that you don't know about. An all cash offer beats both of those scenarios as far as a more clean offer because you don't have to worry about the finance contingency kicking in like the last 3 or 4 days of an offer before it goes accepted. The most logical thought after learning that an all cash offer beats a mortgage is that you're doomed in this market. And that's not the case. Every buyer isn't walking around with $1 million in cash for a house. So there's a strategy here as well. A lot of times an all cash buyer ends up getting a mortgage. What's the deal with that? Well, they offered to buy the house in cash, but they can pretty much pay for it any way they want as long as they bring the money on closing day. So what you would usually see in this case is someone makes an all cash offer. In that offer, they include a bank statement or a financial document showing that they have the cash to close. And then when the offer is accepted, they work to get a mortgage in the interim. Closing day comes and the seller really doesn't know otherwise. So you can, that's part of the contract that you're buying in cash, but that doesn't mean that you can't get a mortgage. There's probably going to be some sort of inspection clause, and the seller is probably going to be selling as is. You can choose not to waive the inspection clause, but your offer will not be as clean as someone who does. So I always recommend getting a home inspection. But it's how you word the as is and inspection clause that can differentiate your offer from another potential buyer. So just keep in mind that you want to be on the buyer side, you want to have the option for an inspection. And I'll get into it a little bit later in the video about how you can kind of get what you want, which is that inspection, and still be able to beat somebody else's offer. There are many contract writers. Take a look at the ones you need and the ones you really don't. So there's a lot of riders. Riders are things that go with the offer that aren't usually found in an offer. For example, there could be a subdivision rider that says something like you have 10 days to see the covenants and indentures, and if you don't like anything in there, you can walk from the offer. The inclusion of that rider is going to make a less clean contract than someone else's who doesn't have that rider. We talked about the appraisal writer previously. Sellers in this market are concerned that the sales price of homes are rising so quickly that an appraiser may not agree to the value of the home that a buyer offered. This would normally mean that the buyer would be responsible for the difference between what it appraises for and what the house actually sells for. Appraisal writers benefit the buyer, and they're of no significance to the seller. The seller just sees them as impediments to getting the house sold. Another idea is the less personal property written into the offer, the better. An appraisal is supposed to be the property itself and not its contents. As an example, is a house with a Thermidor stove worth more than a house with a Frigidaire? Appraisers are loath to get into that sort of thing. An agent representing the seller is usually going to look for an offer that has few, if any, personal property involved. Why? Well, would you want to lose a deal over a light fixture? No. Now, this doesn't mean that down the line you couldn't ask to purchase furniture or personal property. It just means that for your offer to be clean, you want to avoid as much personal property that you can. Another issue is earnest money can make a difference. Earnest money is the money that you put down at the time of the offer that shows the seller that you are serious about acquiring the house. As a quick example, if someone puts $500 down in earnest money and someone else puts down $20,000, the seller is more likely to go with someone who put down the $20,000. Why? If the seller completes his side of the offer to purchase and the buyer does not, the seller can keep the money. While this isn't a game I'd recommend to play, I will say that more escrow usually means a better chance of contract acceptance. So now that you have a good idea about what a clean offer is, I wanted to kind of show you different scenarios that actually happens. So let's just say there's two offers. Okay, the first offer has $300,000 as a sales price, 5% down in escrow, which is about $15,000, a 30-day close, cash offer with proof of funds included, as is inspections for buyer benefit only, no appraisal writer, no personal property included in the offer, but there's a buyer love letter. Offer two, $305,000 sales price, $1,000 in escrow, 45-day close, a mortgage with a pre-approval, a finance contingency, an appraisal writer, and the buyer wants the living room couch and one chair in the basement, 10 days to get inspections, and 10 days to negotiate a resolution. Which offer are you taking? Well, the one with $5,000 more in the sales price? Maybe not. The first offer is clean. The chance of that closing without a snag are great. There's no concern for financing, there's no concern about personal property, and there's no concern about leaving furniture. When the seller takes the first offer, buyer two is going to be mad. They will say that they had the highest offer and therefore they should get the house. The seller's agent probably isn't going to tell the buyer what the house sold for. They'll probably find out about that when the house actually closes, but it's important to note that sometimes the highest money isn't the best offer. Understand that if you're in a multiple offer situation, one little concession here or there is going to be the difference in the seller accepting your offer. That's why I despise the banning of buyer love letters. What is that? It's a letter that the buyer writes telling the seller how much they love the house and how much they'd like to be chosen. The National Association of Realtors has said that you must be careful because it could be construed as a violation of fair housing laws. But that letter could be the difference between a buyer getting a house and not. So I disagree. If people are racist, they're racist. The banning of a love letter isn't going to solve the problem of being a racist in the first place. Finally, I know you get worried about the fact that somebody has an all cash offer and you don't. But let's look at another scenario. This time, both people have a mortgage. So offer one, $310,000 sale price, a 30-day close, a finance contingency, an appraisal writer. Buyer wants the living room couch and one chair in the basement, 10 days for inspections, 10 days to negotiate resolution. The second offer has a $307,000 sale price, 30 days to close, finance contingency, appraisal writer, and inspections for buyer informational purposes only. Who wins? Well, offer two. Even though it's $3,000 less, the seller doesn't have to deal with buyer inspections or personal property. Keep this sort of thing in mind. When there are 40 offers on a house, there's going to be probably 20 that are exactly the same. So the more clean you can make your offer, the better chance you have to get the house. It's a tough market out there. Even now, like rates have raised now to 4%. I know, like down the road, maybe somebody's gonna be laughing if rates are at 6% or if they even go down again in the threes. But the more clean of a contract you can write, okay, and sleep at night. I mean, understand that if you're totally uncomfortable buying a house without inspections, then don't buy a house without inspections. I mean, that's just the way it is. But the cleaner you can make a contract, every single aspect of that offer matters. And so I'm just wanted to put out some things, that may help. When your agent says we need to write the cleanest contract possible, that's what they're talking about. And that's what the seller's going to want in this market. Now, down the road, it could change. It could turn into a buyer's market someday. And in that case, expect to see your contingencies added. Expect to see everything in there, and expect the sellers to have to make concessions. But that isn't the market we're in right now. With that, I'm going to head on out. I just wanted to say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll catch you on the next one.